The most commonly used draw tools are all found in the Draw toolbox. Let's open it up. The first tools we're going to talk about are the line tools. There are two types of lines in Dynarscape. There are simple lines, which are just the simplest form of geometry in Dynarscape. And then there are polylines. Polylines basically are lines that are joined together end to end. They can be either straight lines or curves. Let's start with the line tool. The line tool has a modifier that allows you to enter the length or the angle of the line that you wish to draw. You can choose not to enter any of those and just draw freehand. Your angle of your line will be controlled then by your constraints. I will set my constraints to none just to allow me to draw freehand first. First thing you do before you draw your line is choose the layer you wish to draw on. I'm going to choose the Drive Road layer. To insert my line, I left click to drop my first point down and move my mouse away so I can see the line following my crosshair. And to actually place the line, all I need to do is left click and it will drop a line down from the first point to the second point that I selected on the screen. It allows me to continue drawing lines that are joined end to end. They're all individual line segments, so I can keep going around. And if I want to finish, all I need to do is right click. Right click will disconnect me from the line segment and allow me to start a new line in a different location. Like that. Now if I turn my constraints to ortho, it will only allow me to draw lines that are either vertical or horizontal on my screen. So this would be useful if I was drawing my house outline to keep everything nice and square. If I turn it to horizontal, I'll only get lines across the screen. Vertical will only allow me to draw up and down, and polar will give me an additional angle, and the polar default is usually set to 45 degrees. So if I set my constraints to polar and start drawing, I have both the 90-degree angles and I have an additional 45-degree angle to draw with, which is usually the most commonly used angle in landscaping and architecture. You can set that angle to whatever you wish, or you can turn your constraints to none and set a specific angle here. I can also set a specific length to my lines, so I can type in a number and it's going to draw a line that's as long as that number that I've placed there. And I can draw continuous lines that are connected end to end at all different lengths. This is how I would draw things like my house and my other design elements. To draw accurately, meaning if I wanted to now start a line that was connected to the end of another line, if I were to do that freehand like this and zoom in really close, you'll notice that those lines are not connected end to end accurately. And this could become a problem if I'm using some of the measuring tools and some of the hatch tools that require the area to be completely closed properly. So how do I join these lines together correctly or accurately? That's where Inference comes into play. Sometimes it's referred to as object snap in other CAD programs. And basically what that does, when I turn that on, I'll zoom out a little bit here and start drawing my lines. When I get close, you notice that there's a box surrounding my crosshair now. When that box gets close to any geometry, it'll actually snap itself to it, and it'll tell you where it's snapping to. In this case, it's snapping to the end of that line. If I left click now, it'll snap it exactly to the end of that line. Or I'm going to basically clear this the quantity here by just clicking on this arrow, clears the quantity. I can also connect to anywhere on a line, so it'll connect exactly on the line, or to a midpoint, or to an end point. In the case of a circle, you can attach yourself to the origin, the center of the circle, and things like that. It'll tell you right beside the crosshair what it's snapping to at that current time. So that's lines using constraints and inference. Lines and any of the drawing tools are going to be affected by constraints and inference. And inference will allow you to draw accurately. Constraints will allow you to draw nice and straight lines vertically or horizontally on your screen, kind of like guidelines. Next, we're going to look at the Polyline tool. The Polyline tool gives you a bit of a different modifier with some other options to choose from. I'm not going to touch any of those. I'm just going to start drawing. I'm going to choose a different layer. I'm going to choose a property layer, which is going to give me a dashed line. When I start drawing now, I basically start the same way. I left click on my screen to drop my first point down. I can use my inference, I can use my constraints as well, the same way with the line tool, and I can join my lines to other lines on the drawing as well. But you notice that my line stays highlighted white. It doesn't revert to the color of the layer yet, and it's not until I finish drawing my line by dropping all my line segments down and then right click that will change to the color of the layer that I've chosen for this line. So you see now that it's one continuous line, all the same color. If I hit escape, and escape is what's called neutral mode, allowing you to get out of anything that you're in. When I hit escape, I can then click on any line segment or object on my screen. When I click on it, I get these grips. And you'll see that when I click on a line segment, a single line segment that I drew with my first tool, I will get only 3 grips, and it'll only highlight one segment. Hit escape again. I'm going to hit repaint to repaint the screen. If I click on my polyline, it's going to highlight the entire line segment. That's what a polyline is. It's basically a number of line segments all joined together end to end to form a continuous polyline. Let's go back to the polyline tool and look at some of the other options. I'm going to choose a different layer to draw with now. I'm going to choose my plant bed layer. There's another option with the polyline tool. It's called a smooth polyline. That's what gives nice smooth curves. And basically the way this works, I'm going to turn inference off. Constraints should always be off when you're using the smooth polyline option here, because it'll force you to draw lines in the directions that you don't want to go. The way this tool works basically is you left click and you move your mouse away. By default, it always wants to go from left to right. That's because that's the way it's set up. It has to choose a certain direction to start. I can't start in any arbitrary direction, so it has to start one direction. It's been set up to go from left to right, which is 0 degrees. That's the start angle that's shown here. And basically all I need to do is left click for my second point, move my mouse away. If I keep my mouse too close, you'll get stuff like this happening. So move your mouse away, you'll have a lot more control of where your next curve is going to go, and you can left click, drop it down, left click, and then right click to end it. It'll snap back to that last point. So I have a nice smooth curved line. So how do I get that line to go in another direction? It's very simple. The easiest way to do that, there's several ways. The first way is to start with a straight line. So turn smooth polyline off. Start in the direction that you want to go. So say for instance I want my curve to go this way. Start in that direction, then turn smooth polyline on. It'll actually start drawing curves that are going in that direction. So I can continue drawing curves in that direction as I start there. So I right click to finish it. Now I've got a line that's going in the direction that I want to go. There's another option that you can choose, and it's called defining the start angle. If I click on that, this will turn gray, meaning that it's actually not drawing lines. It just wants to draw a temporary line in the direction that I want to go. So say for instance I want to go straight down like this, so I'm just drawing a temporary line. It means nothing. All it's going to do is set the angle for me. So now that angle that I just drew that line at is 270 degrees. It's not drawn a line yet, but it wants me to start drawing my line. I left click and it's going to draw my line in that direction. So this way you have some control of which way the line is going to go. The polyline is controlled by the constraints as well. So I could turn my constraints to polar. If I try to draw lines with that, you'll see what happens. It doesn't give me the options that I want. So I'll turn that off. I can use my constraints to draw nice straight lines as I did with the line tool. It'll draw all nice straight lines that are guided vertically and horizontally on my screen by the constraints. So basically that's it. Polylines and lines, those are the basic drawing tools that you're going to use on most projects. The last thing that I want to talk about is editing polylines. I'm going to turn my constraints to none. Make sure your inference is turned off. If you want to edit lines like this line right here, you can change the location by grabbing these grips. So I want to talk briefly about grips. Grips are basically the endpoints and midpoints of lines or objects that you can select and modify. And to modify them, you basically need to be first in neutral mode for one. Then you click on the object that you wish to modify. Click on and I'm left clicking on each of these situations. left click on the grip that you wish to modify and let go, and it will attach itself to your crosshairs, allowing you to move it into another location. So I can do that with grips between lines. It'll grab both line segments that are joined together and it will move them together at the same time. I can also bend the middle grip of polylines, and polylines, and that's how polylines behave differently than lines do, in that polylines can be bent into curves. So straight polylines can be bent into a curve, so I can turn this entire polyline into a series of curves like this. And I can tweak the endpoints and modify it to tweak it, to adjust it to whatever I'd like to see. With the line tool, or lines that were drawn with the line tool, if I grab the end grip, it will pull itself away from the last line segment that it was attached to, because it's an individual line segment. If I grab the middle grip, it'll take the whole line segment away with it and it won't bend it. That's because lines are a simpler form, they cannot be turned into curves. Polylines can. The last option in the polyline modifier is one called close polyline. Basically what that means is that when I draw a line, it's going to close it, meaning that it'll take my last point that I've selected and draw a line back to the very first one. So that'll create a closed polyline. That's what you would use to create a closed area for putting a hatch pattern or something like that in. You'll also notice that the polyline tool does not have a place to insert length or angle. With the polyline tool, the only way to see how long the line segment is that you're drawing is by using what's called a coordinate tracking panel. When I turn that on, it gives me this little panel here, and what happens is when I start drawing my line segment, it starts at 0, and as I move my mouse away, this coordinate tracking panel will track how long my line segment is. So I can draw lines as accurately as I wish with this overview tracking panel without having to actually type in a measurement or an angle.